Hey everybody, it's Kelly. Welcome back to another episode of Ask a Therapist. So many of you know May is Mental Health Month, but I don't know how many of you know May is actually also Masturbation Month. And it is a national thing in the US, but this is an international thing. So we're talking about it. Also, earlier this month, or maybe last month, I did a video on Girl Defined, and I told you that I was going to buy some of the curriculum and I was going to go over it with you in a video. So to bring the two together, they have a guide on finding freedom from masturbation, and I'm going to go over that guide with you and explain to you sort of what's happening. Because for many of you who grew up in religious homes, or I don't know, any home at all that didn't have free and open conversation about sexuality and sex, you probably grew up with some of the same principles and ideas about what it meant to self-pleasure. And I want to help you to sort of break those stereotypes and those ideas. So their guide starts out with a beautiful array of flowers, finding freedom from masturbation. I'm not going to read this whole thing to you. In the very first sentence, masturbation is one of those words that causes you to feel awkward and embarrassed. So even if you went into this not feeling awkward or embarrassed about it, they're telling you what you should feel off the bat. And if you don't, you're going to start asking yourself why you don't. Now, likely, if you have been handed this, the person who's handing you this or talking to you about it is acting awkward and weird about it. So you're under the impression this is awkward and weird anyway. But they're normalizing the idea that you're supposed to feel awkward and weird about your body, which, as we know, is a very common thread anyway. And we ask all the typical questions. Is it sin? Is it wrong? Does the Bible talk about it? Blah, 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 blah. And then we get to this lovely line, which right away starts heaping on the guilt.
God cares deeply about things. He created our sexuality, he created our bodies, and he wants us to use it for him.
And we go to the next paragraph, and it talks about how
we just want an answer. We want things to be black and white. We just want someone to tell if it's right or wrong.
Which then we're implying that we're lazy and we don't want to do the work to find the answers. So we've got guilt, we've got laziness, and the very next paragraph after that is telling us that our goal as Christian women should always be to discern the difference between authentic biblical sex and counterfeit worldly sex. Whoa. In that sentence alone, we are heaping the guilt and responsibility on women. We are saying that anything that is not directly from the Bible is counterfeit and worldly, and everything that's worldly is counterfeit, right? So we're making very, very big divides, and the responsibility, once again, is on the women in, again, a man-woman relationship to make sure that everything is kept into those two worlds. It's the women's job to discern. What? So then we're told instead of asking, is it right or wrong, we should be asking, is it in line with God's design and purpose for sex and intimacy? And is it an authentic expression of pleasure within marriage? And folks, we're right back here in this same situation where you're told throughout your life until you get married, you're supposed to have no sexual desires, no sexual needs, flee from all of it. Don't even think about it. And then bam, as soon as you get married, floodgates open and all of it's fine. And they expect for it to all just disappear, all that guilt, all that shame and embarrassment that they've already heaped on you for all these worldly thoughts. And you're supposed to know, oh, okay, now I can just have all those thoughts and it's fine. And that's not how the brain works. Like, we all know that's not how psychology works. You can't just shift your thinking on something when you've been trained and instructed for so many years that that part of your brain and that part of your understanding of your body and your mind are wrong and shameful and disgusting. And this is where purity culture really, really, really starts to mess people up in their understanding of their body. Then it goes into a bunch of different examples on how masturbation does not give you a pure heart for God. And these are really interesting because they're such great examples of how Christians twist the Bible to mean what they want it to mean. Because even the very first one, there's two examples, two Bible verses that they cite. First of all, there's a huge typo in this, and it cites a Bible verse that does not say what they want it to say. It's Hebrews 13:14 is what's written in here. It probably should be 13:4. That's the one that says God will judge the sexually immoral. And it doesn't say what sexually immoral is. It doesn't say masturbation anywhere. But because they've assigned sexual immorality to self-pleasure, that's a problem. Because they've assigned sexual immorality to self-pleasure, they say that verse means that. But it doesn't say that. That's the assumption. Again, this is not clearly laid out anywhere, but they've inferred it. And because they are coming from a place of authority and giving this information to younger people, it's being believed. and it's being accepted as truth, and it is messing with people's minds. Number one, they say sexual pleasure was created for intimacy within marriage, which is hysterical if you look at the entire Old Testament, when all of these people who were supposed to be these godly men all had concubines. They weren't married to any of them, but they had children with them, and they were intimate with all of them, and that was all fine, and they were these wise men of God. The idea of marriage to one person is something that was invented by the church later on. Somehow this concept of sex only being ordained by God within the confines of marriage got prescribed to that, because that's how you got people to want to get married, is you told them that's the only way they could have sex, because it's the only way they could stay pure, and everybody wanted to stay pure because they wanted to go to heaven. That's not how it was written into the Bible. That's also not how it was in Jesus's day. That's not how it was later on. That's not how it was throughout the majority of history. But yet here we are in this day and age saying that it's how it's always been. It's how God has always meant it. Even if you believe in the God of the Bible, and even if you believe everything written in the Bible, this is still not true. Number two, it's often fueled by lust. And they cite that verse in Thessalonians that talks about like how you shouldn't abuse your body. Again, it's only abusing your body if you see sex as dirty. Like, if you see touching and discovering your own body as something dirty and shameful, maybe I can see how you would see that as abusing your body. But if you see it as something that is a perfectly acceptable thing to do, which for the record I do, how is that abusing your body? Like, how is that harmful to your body? Once again, we're citing Bible verses that have nothing to do with what they're saying it means. And it does go down later on to talk about how the things that you think about during sex are often like pornographic images or lustful thoughts and that sort of thing, and that you're not supposed to have any of those thoughts prior to marriage, and all those thoughts are wrong and evil and you should flee from them, and all of that is meant for the marriage bed, which again brings me to that question of what happens when you are married and then you have lustful thoughts about your spouse, because you've already trained your brain to think that wanting someone sexually is wrong. Just because it's your spouse doesn't mean you automatically stop thinking that way. That's not how it works. Anyone who has ever tried to shift their thinking from a way that they were trained to think their whole lives into thinking a different way knows that's not how that works. They close out that section with this just zinger of a sentence.
Lasting freedom is only found when we attack our lustful sin at its root and seek God's strength and power to destroy it.
What's the root of sexual attraction? Our bodies? So we just hate our bodies now? Like, that's the root of sexual attraction. And if you attack it at its root and you are somebody who experiences sexual attraction, how do you then experience sexual attraction within the bonds of marriage later on? Like what you want everyone to do. Number 3, they tell us that it fails to bring glory to God, that our bodies are not our own. But they do also talk about when you experience sexual activity outside of marriage, your body becomes a vessel for sin instead of a vessel for God. And that seems strong and weird. But also, again, it's a reminder that our bodies are not our own. And this is where it stops being silly and odd and starts being really nefarious. Because when you're teaching young women their bodies are not their own, that they're not allowed to make decisions for their body, that their bodies are meant for their husbands. It's the first step, well, not even the first step, because they've been taught that for so many years, right? Like,
go hug Uncle Ray.
At Thanksgiving, you're not taught that you have autonomy over your body and who touches you, and you owe family members you haven't seen in a year and not going to see for another year your hugs because you're family, or you get made fun of on the playground and it's
because he likes you.
Like, you owe them attention because they're making fun of you. Like, you are constantly taught that you owe people things because of how they interact with you. Like, that's the message you're getting. But here you're being taught that your body's not your own and it's just a vessel. So if you're just a vessel and there's no meaning to it, then what does it matter if you just sort of let someone use your body, someone you're married to later? Like, what does it matter if you're not feeling up for it that night and your husband is, and you don't get to say no? Like, how far does that then go for people when they're trained to think that they have no autonomy over their own body and who touches it and when? How deep does that message go? Because I know for a lot of us, it goes pretty freaking deep. The next one, it talks about how it's not an authentic form of sexuality, which is hysterical because, I don't really think that they don't see any authentic form of sexuality except for cishet, like existence. They don't really have much to back this up except where they say we're called to obey God's design, not the worldly pressures and desires, which is actually hysterical because in some of the research that I was doing about today and for May in general, the world as a whole does have a fairly intense stigma about masturbation. That's why May was named National Masturbation Month, to take the stigma out and help people to talk about it and to understand what self-pleasure means, that it's not necessarily a bad thing and that there are benefits and that it doesn't have to be embarrassing. So then we get to our steps on how to beat it, which are just my favorite part about all of this. And step one is you need to confess it. You need to do it now. The pressure and the guilt that they heap on you to do that first step immediately before you do anything else is so intense, but you've read all of this other stuff that has convinced you that it's so bad. So now you have to go confess it. And you have to go confess it because once you've confessed it, it's really hard to back down from it. Independent thought is not found in any of this. It's all, listen, I am giving you these Bible verses and they might not say what you think they say. I'm going to tell you what they say. Just trust me. Don't look them up. Don't worry about it. Okay, number 2 is choose to fight the battle with everything you've got. And they say if you fight with everything you got, you'll defeat it. Which the other side of that means if you don't defeat it, it's your own fault. You were too weak. You didn't fight hard enough. Which is how they get around this idea that maybe this isn't a battle that needs to be won. Maybe this isn't something that God actually hates that much. No. If you don't win, it's because you weren't enough. That's got to be the only answer. All right, step 3 and 4 we're going to talk about together because it's pray fervently and passionately and memorize the word daily. And so basically what they want you to do is take all of your like sexual frustration and all of your energy you would put into this thing and put it into the Bible. If you take all of that energy and put it into the Bible, what is going to happen is those neural pathways, those connections are going to continue to be connections your whole life. Okay, until you like rewire those connections later. They just want you to take all of that energy and pour it into something else. So they recognize that there's a lot of energy behind this and they just want you to put it into the Bible and put it into praying and basically like connect those two things in your mind. Like this energy goes into this, which draw your own conclusions for that. But like what happens in your head when you do that? What do you think happens? Okay, so that's the message. I want to talk to you about the truth behind masturbation. Self-pleasure is actually not the terrible boogeyman that they're trying to make it seem, and it's actually not the terrible boogeyman that a lot of us grew up with either. Also, it is not a required thing if it is not something that you find enjoyable. And I think that's really important for people to know. When we talk about this, the attempt is to normalize it. And I think the other part of it is to remind people that we should also normalize not doing it. If it's not something you want to do, don't do it. If it's something you want to do it. Many of us grew up in homes or grew up in situations where it was dirty or wrong or weird or not talked about when you touched yourself. And like, what's the purpose of it and what does it mean? So you grew up not understanding it. And you grew up thinking it was shameful. And then if you grew up in a church setting, you were tossed this bucket of crap that I just read through. Maybe not directly in that kind of a layout, but it was either not talked about or was talked about in a similar kind of way. But in reality, there are a ton of benefits from masturbation if it is something that you're inclined to do. What are the benefits? I'm glad you asked. Increased confidence, better sleep, stress relief, lower risk of prostate cancer, relief of menstrual cramps. It can help men last longer. It can release dopamine and oxytocin. It can increase your estrogen, which leads to better hair and better skin. It can increase your libido. It can increase your cognitive function. And honestly, my favorite is it can teach you about your own sexuality and it can teach you about what turns you on. When I talk to people about masturbation, it is usually on the principle of, do you know what you like? Like, do you know what your body responds to? Because I talk to a lot of people, especially through this channel, who are just discovering their own sexuality and just discovering what their body responds to, either because they're coming out later in life or because they're starting to understand themselves in a different kind of way at whatever stage in life they are in, that they go seeking information that brings them to this channel. And because of that, they end up in a place where they're like, what do I want? How do I tell somebody what I want? How do I figure out what my body responds to? And one of the easiest ways to do that is to discover it yourself so you can direct somebody in that way. When you're more comfortable with your body, you're going to be more comfortable explaining that to somebody else too. So those who are inclined to use aids, there are two things I want to talk to you about. First of all, this is not sponsored. If you want to go to the website, lelo.com, you can go ahead and do that and look these up. They have a sale sale going on right now. And if you want to use my affiliate link, which by the way, I don't get any money from, they just track how many people go to see them through my link. That's below in the description, but I don't get any money from this. I'm not sponsored in any way from them. There's two things that I want to bring to your attention if you are inclined to use aids. And if this is weird for you, I will go ahead and put right here where you should go to skip this. Okay. So this is the Lily 2 that they sell. Very small. And then they've got the Dot. Both of them fully waterproof, and both of them have multiple different vibration settings. One of them's a little more portable than the other one. Everything comes in drawstring pouches and discreet packaging. Their stuff holds up. It's made of quality materials. And the thing that I really like about their company is that it's inclusive. They do not have any expectations of who you are or who your partner is. They just want you to enjoy yourself. And so if you're looking for a company that has good ethics and is inclusive across the board, I would suggest you check them out. Great company to go to if you're looking for high quality aids to use by yourself or with a partner. Sometimes it is hard to know where to start if self-pleasure is not something that you're really familiar with. All of those benefits, all of those options that are available to you can be daunting. So really, if you want to start sort of baseline with, I'm super uncomfortable with masturbation and I'm not sure why, the first thing to do is ask yourself that question. Why? Like, is it because you don't feel like it's necessary for you? Then you can just stop there. It doesn't need to be something that's necessary in your life. If that's not it, then maybe dig a little deeper. Why is it something that feels so controversial for you? Why is it something that you're not sure about or you haven't thought about? Or why is something that causes you that kind of shame or fear or whatever it is that you're feeling? If it's something that's from your past, then I don't know, maybe asking the question of where does that come from? How did I get that message? And is that a message I need to still keep? Is that from somewhere of actual concern and does it have merit in my life? Or is it something that's left over from something that I don't actually believe anymore? And then you start to work on letting it go. Releasing ourselves from purity culture is hard. I get that. And it is unfortunately sometimes more work than getting into purity culture in the first place, a lot of times because we didn't know we were doing it. And I know that super sucks. One of the things I found to be extremely beneficial is the community here on this channel in the comments on so many of these videos where people are supporting each other and telling their story and sharing their experiences. It has been amazing to watch. And I love that you all are supporting each other so much. So please keep that up because I know there are so many people who are being impacted by story sharing and support and by hearing the fact that they are not alone. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you all next time. And until then, take care of yourselves and each other.